there, welcome to Humans of Authenticity, and thank you for choosing my podcast. My name is Lily, and I'll be your host. Humans of Authenticity will share many heartfelt conversations with my guests on their stories and how they embrace their authenticity in all forms. Authenticity will be a buzzword unless we pause and reflect on what it means for us, for individuals like you and me. Join me in these conversations. In each episode, my guests will choose a keyword from a selection of 12, which will be used as the theme of the conversation. These keywords change frequently, so you will only hear the same keyword once. Enjoy the episode today. Thank you, Carlos, for being here with me today. Let's start with your story. Can you share with us 3 things you'd like us to know about you?
3 things that I'd like the audience to know about me. I'm still a little kid from Chicago's little village at heart. Born and raised in Chicago's little village. Single mom, 5 siblings. And that's number 1. We'll get to that in terms of culture, remembering and never forgetting where you come from. The second part, and people already probably know this, I was fortunate to serve in the United States Marine Corps for 5 years during 9/11 as well. And so that impacted my life incredibly. The third thing that, again, other people may already know is I love to volunteer and I love to serve and I love to give back. Through volunteering, helping, through coaching, mentoring, that is one of my passions.
Thank you. You're one of the first person I've spoken with who has background in the U.S. Marine Corps. Can you unpack that experience a little bit for us and share how that experience influenced your authenticity and how you express your authentic self?
Yeah, I'll take you back to growing up in little village in Chicago and not knowing exactly what I wanted to do in terms of college education. Single mom, again, the money was probably not there. Did not want to work in a factory. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I did not want to do that. Nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't for me. I had a cousin, got a family history of serving in the armed forces. Cousin had joined the Marine Corps a year before me, came back in his nice dress blue uniform, right? And so I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Told me about it, told me about the challenge. And at that point, I was sold. I was up for the challenge. 19-year-old, went to San Diego, 13 months of boot camp. I don't know how to describe it, but it pretty much changed my life. And so I had to kind of figure things out on my own. Got shipped to Okinawa, Japan for my first duty station. 19-year-old kid, had never been away from home for a long period of time. And you just had to kind of figure stuff out, see what you were made of. And you're challenged, you have to overcome some of those adversities. Got a chance to go to Korea, got a chance to go to Arlington, Virginia, Washington, D.C. area, and then eventually made my way to Germany after September 11th. Marine Corps is a huge part of my life, and I think a big reason why I say it's impactful is because of the Marines themselves. We'll get into the culture aspect of that, but Marines in all walks of life from all across the country come together to serve, and there's a bond there that I can't fully describe.
All right, there is a particular elements of the story you've shared that I really want to learn more. You say that experience changed your life, you're trying to figure stuff out, see what you were made of. Can you describe for me, how do you see what you made of during that experience?
I'll describe my experience in Okinawa. 19-year-old kid, hadn't been away from home, and you're put into a platoon, I can say. In that platoon, you've got maybe 20 different Marines doing different things. And, we need a training officer, you need a safety officer, we need to do our jobs as well. And so it's almost like a competition to some extent, right? So when I say what you're made of, how do you stack up against others? How do you compete? How do you respond to failure? Because failure is a part of life, part of the Marine Corps as well. You've got to fail before you can learn from those mistakes, right, and get better. So that's how I was able to test myself, see where I stacked up against others. I didn't do too bad. That's where the confidence building comes into play. You do that over and over again throughout the enlistment, and at some point you have all the confidence in the world, maybe in your small little world, but it really helps to shape and and mold the person that I am today.
I want to know a bit more specific on that. Can you give me an example when you felt that your ability was tested?
I'll give you one example. We had a deployment to South Korea. For 30 days, we were basically doing 24-hour shifts. So 24 hours on, 24 hours off. And this was an exercise, not a deployment. And in that exercise, there was an opportunity to be viewed for a meritorious promotion. And so I talk about the competition part of it. So there are slots for promotion. And again, 30 in the field, 24-hour shifts, not the sharpest looking uniform, was just rags. I got pulled from a pool and they said, hey, there's a more meritorious promotion. Would you want to participate? And I said, okay, tell me more. So we had to know about Marine Corps history. We had to know about uniform regulations. You had to be sharp. You had to learn how to march. You had to have composure in front of others. And so all of those things in the field, not prepared. And maybe within a day's notice, I had to get myself prepared. So in the field, there's no iron. So I can't iron my uniform. And so we had to be creative and maybe put some equipment on top of your uniform to make a crease, maintain a crease. Going forward to that, I was able to stand in front of Marine Corps leadership. I was able to impress some of them with my knowledge of Marine Corps uniform regulations, and there are a lot of them. And just with presence, bearing, I was able to get meritoriously promoted to Lance Corporal. And sometime later, not even a few months later, the same opportunity for the next rank was available. But this time I had to do a 3-mile physical fitness test. I had to do an inspection where all of my military gear was put on a bed and it had to be inspected by somebody, sometimes white glove inspection. And I went through all of that and I was able to get promoted meritoriously to corporal as well. So that started to tell me like, hey, there's something here, right? I'm not too bad at this. And that started to build that confidence. That's when I knew like, hey, there's something here.
That's awesome. And congratulations for those promotion. Go back to the theme of this podcast series about authenticity. How would you describe your authentic self through all of this experience?
My authentic self, I look at it as being comfortable to open up, right, to others. You hear about it all the time. I'm different at home than I am in the workplace. And I don't know if anybody can fully be themselves in the workplace, but as much as you can, I think that's where being your authentic self comes in. And that means being true to your ideals. That means being true to some of the customs that you have and not changing. I know you have to change and contort yourself sometimes, but be who you are, right? I'm wearing the Marine Corps shirt. That's who I am. You look behind me. That's who I am. I have a sense of pride in that. And so it doesn't matter where I'm put in, that's going to come out. But when I think about being my authentic self, that's what I think about. I want others to know, I'm not changing who I am just because I'm with a different group.
Thank you. So let's get to our keywords conversations. I gave you a list of 12 keywords. Which words or words did you choose?
So the 3 words that I chose are fullest, discipline, and culture.
The original rules of the game is for you to select just one out of the 12, but you come up with 3. Can you describe your thought process when you're selecting these 3?
I just felt that one keyword was not enough to describe. And maybe I just didn't want to focus on one particular topic. But as I thought about it, I felt like, hey, these 3 particular keywords, they have been impactful in my life. And they really, together, they weave the story of Carlos. And so that's why I chose the 3 words here.
Thank you. So let's unpack one at a time. Let's start with fullest. And the context of this particular word when I gave it to you in the list is fullest as in live your life to the fullest. Can you describe your experience for me, what that means for you when you see the term live life to the fullest?
To me, it means not holding back. And it means dreaming big. And I say, if you're thinking about doing something, think big, but start small. Have no reservations in terms of opportunities. Not every opportunity is the right one, but know yourself, trust yourself, and sometimes you have to go for it and seize that opportunity. So when we think about living life to the fullest, know yourself, trust yourself, go for it. There might be some sayings where it's like you might be scared and intimidated at the opportunity, but do it anyway. And I think you'll come out on the other side a better person because you'll have experienced that. You might have doubted yourself, but you did it anyway, right? And so that's an accomplishment in of itself. And I'll go on a little bit of a tangent. My wife and I, we love to travel. And the last 10 years, I think we've gone to many different places. My wife at some point said, well, we can do all of this traveling when we're retired. And I said, no way. I'm not waiting until I'm 65. I don't know what my health condition might be. I don't know if I'm able to walk around to be mobile. So I'm doing it now. And so that sense of fear and the unknown, and I've never been outside of, the United States type of thing, I wasn't having it. So I kind of forced her to think about the fullest aspect of it as well. And we went for it. I'd much rather reflect than anticipate in the future to say we might do this. I can look back and say we actually did it.
Thanks for that. I want to get some example and be a bit more specific. I hear a lot and I read a lot about dream big, go for it, not be scared. And for me, it sounds great. It sounds very aspiration. But reality is that we will be scared. How do you get over that? Can you share with me a time when you were scared of making a decisions, but you go for it anyway? And I love to, for this particular example, hearing your thought process, what motivates you to do it anyway, knowing the unknowing that heading towards you when you make that decision?
I can give you a recent example. I am the chair for the ASAE Technology Professionals Advisory Council. The topic of AI is everywhere. You have vendors and consultants who are talking about it, purported subject matter experts. We don't see that in the ASAE ecosystem too much. One of the things that I thought we should consider is to create an AI advisory task force. So I took it upon myself to call on colleagues to say, hey, I think this is a need. People are asking for AI leadership. I think we should give it to them. That's scary because not a lot of people know exactly the full capabilities of AI. Here I am trying to bring people together and say, here's what I think we should do. That's scary. And you always have that fear of people not agreeing with your ideas, people maybe not understanding what the vision might be, people not understanding what the need might be. You always have that fear of being judged. That's always there. That never goes away, right? And so you have to be able to control that. But I did it anyway. And so I called people together and we're in the beginning stages of it. But I thought if we let this opportunity pass, as the chair of the tech council, I thought it would be unforgiving in some respects. I thought about all of those things and I was scared, and I'm still scared to some extent, but I know that something has to be done. And that's what propelled me to go ahead and move forward, charge forward.
Thank you. What I hear from that is somehow you are scared, but you say it's okay to be scared. And I see that you are more comfortable with being scared and expanding your comfort zone. That's a great lesson to learn. Let's unpack your second keyword, discipline. When I put discipline in the list of the 12, a bit of a reflection on myself, I would probably be the least person who have a strong discipline in my practice. Can you describe for me how you hold disciplines in your daily life?
I'll say that first off, you wouldn't be where you're at without discipline. So you say that you don't have discipline, but I beg to differ. Discipline for me, the definition has changed over time. Discipline to me as a 19-year-old Marine was an instant response and willing obedience to orders. It's still in my mind. We had to recite that over and over again. And I get it. You're a Marine, and for whatever reason, by the fact of you signing on that dotted line and enlisting, you may have to give your life. We know that going in. You may go into a conflict of some sort of discipline, responding to orders, right? And it may save your buddy's life. So that discipline as a 19-year-old, discipline as I've grown and matured, has morphed into something different. Discipline is having the wherewithal to be able to complete a task, to complete a project. You've got to find it in you to know that, hey, I've got to do this, and I've got to have some sort of regimen to be able to lay out exactly what I want to do, carve out some time. Could be 5 o'clock in the morning, could be 4 o'clock in the morning when people are sleeping. But if that's the most effective time for you, you've got to have that discipline to be able to continue to do that. It depends on the need. I think everybody has discipline. I think there are levels of discipline. But that's how I can describe the keyword discipline and what that means to me and how I think of using discipline in my everyday life.
Okay, let's be a bit creative with unpacking the example of this word. How do you demonstrate disciplines when you are doing a fun activities, like when you are going on traveling? How do you demonstrate your disciplines in that scenario?
I'm an avid amateur photographer. When I think about traveling to any destination, I think about what pictures am I going to take. So I try to plan some of those out. Obviously, some of them are spontaneous, but where the discipline comes in is, and I've done this many times, and maybe you're supposed to sleep in while you're on vacation, but I'm up at 5. I grab my camera while most people are sleeping. I walk the city or the town that I'm in to get my photographs, to learn more about the city that I'm in. And so I could wait till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, right, and sleep in a little bit, but I feel like I might be missing out. So I think that's where I can talk about the discipline that and where that comes in. And then the discipline after you get your shots to come back and say, you've got to organize the photographs and you've got to catalog them and you've got to rename them. You might do some photo touch-ups, but it's a process, right? And so I can take the pictures and I can say, I'll worry about it when I get home, right after the vacation. But, the discipline part is like, I'm going to look at some of them right now and I'm going to process them or catalog them or store them. So that's one example of what I can share in terms of being fun and discipline.
Yeah, this is really cool. When I'm going traveling, I take so many photos, but I lack the other side of the processing and categorizing and sharing them. I know that you are sharing your photos on the internet. Where can we find them if you are happy to share with us?
Yeah, I have a website. It's called semperwifi.com. I don't do it as much now, just kind of busy, but I used to heavily post on Instagram. It's a spin on Marines are Semperfi, and just a spin on that name, Semper Wi-Fi.
Ah, I see. Thank you. I'll put the website on the show notes so that we can find them afterwards. Thank you for that. Let's go back to earlier in the conversations. You talk a lot about your upbringings from Chicago with your families. And what I'm hearing is there are a lot of elements in your upbringing that influence your culture. So let's unpack that keyword, culture. What role does culture play in how you express your authentic self these days?
I think culture is embedded in everything. And so what does culture really mean? It means customs, it means heritage, it means your ancestors. I often think about that. Here I am, 2023. How did I get here? I love history, actually. Some of my family members actually go through Ancestry website and put together the family tree. My sister, we jokingly call her a private detective. She likes to go down that rabbit hole. She was able to put our family tree together going back to post-Civil War. And so when you think about culture and you can look that far back, it gives a sense of pride. You don't know the people who are on that tree necessarily, but they played a huge part and they're a huge reason why you're here today. So that's the culture in terms of self. There are beautiful cultures all around us. We're celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month starting today. You think about associations, you think about the Dell program. There are beautiful cultures all around us. Don't just learn about your own culture, but I think take the time and the opportunity to learn about other cultures. We talked about intersectionality, right? And how do we connect together? How do we relate? I think by learning and understanding other cultures, that makes you a better ally. That makes you a better colleague. And that gives you a better understanding of the people that you work with and their cultures. It's a sign of respect, right? You're able to know a little bit about and maybe share some of the things that you know. Could be African American culture, could be Asian culture. I think that is a connector. I don't think we do enough of that, and I'd like to see more of that. In a nutshell, I think that's what culture means to me, and it's integrated and weaved throughout everything that we do.
I find culture is a very interesting topic. We live in a very multicultural environment these days. And not only the situation in the US, but the entire world is getting a lot more multicultural. The cross-cultural communications, the demonstration of culture become a lot richer, and media helps us to understand each other a lot more. So the question for you, what is the one practical thing that you have been doing or have been learning so that you can hone on your own culture, at the same time embrace yourself in the multicultural environment these days?
So I'm second generation in the United States. My mother was born in Texas, my father in Mexico. Being born in the United States, you don't have a full awareness of the culture. So Chicago's Little Village, I think it's the number one in the Midwest region for Mexican immigrants. I think Central American immigrants as of today. But that's where the introduction to culture comes in. So being born in the United States and seeing immigrants and coexisting, you start to be curious about that culture. You know the work ethic, right? And so people need to support their families and getting up at 4 o'clock. And I think that might be part of where I get that from. To answer your question specifically, how do I stay connected to that? This weekend, Little Village, they're going to have their Mexican Independence Day parade, which is a huge event for Chicago's Little Village. I like to take photographs. So I go every year, I volunteer my time to take photographs of the parade. It's probably a 2-mile stretch, and I probably walk maybe 10 miles in total back and forth up and down that street, just making sure I get the people's reaction, maybe the flags that they have out, maybe the soccer jerseys, but you get to see, you get to hear, and you get to smell and taste the culture of Mexican Americans. That's how I stay connected to my own culture.
That sounds great. So thinking about that event this coming weekend, what elements of that event are you planning to take photos of? And from that, I'd love to know what stories are you planning to tell when showing those photos to the rest of the world?
I'll say at the most recent, Delp reunion, we talked about storytelling. I consider myself a storyteller through writing, through photographs. I love to take pictures of people. I love to get up close and personal, not necessarily invade your space, but I want to get in your space and I want to break down that barrier and I want to get that smile. I want your kid to smile, right? That's what I go for. There are landscape pictures, but I think the much more interesting ones are of the people themselves. And so I'll take many photographs tomorrow and I'll go through and I'll review them. And outside in those photographs, I'll probably pick out a few to publish. I'll write a story about it. I'll write about the experience. I'll write about how happy they were, how prideful they were. I just want to be able to focus on that individual and that culture in that moment. So that's my intention, for taking photographs this weekend and what I'll do post-processing as well.
That's great. I look forward to seeing them when they are ready. You mentioned a lot about your childhood and upbringing. Would you like to share a little bit more of that in terms of culture?
Sure. Growing up, Chicago's Little Village neighborhood, single mother, your father just wasn't there. I don't really know him. What I know about the culture is seeing my mother in terms of her work ethic working two jobs. My mom is very prideful in terms of being from Texas. So that's part of my culture as well. Hano music is what it's called. I grew up with that in the household. That was another connecting point for other Delpers too. I mentioned the immigrant community and seeing how prideful they are as well in terms of their culture, the lack of opportunities in their native countries, and the reasons why they come to the United States for opportunities. Without that, I'm not sure if I would be the same person today. So I'm not sure if I gave you exactly what you're looking for, but thinking back, that's what I can think about and reflect on my upbringing and culture. And I will say one more thing. So part of that, growing up in the United States, I've had opportunities to go to Mexico, not with my own family, but with other families. You get to see different parts of Mexico, different parts of the culture, big cities, right? And maybe small towns, small villages in Mexico. And it's just a different way of life. And so, that's part of my experience. And that's what I carry with me everywhere I go as well, in terms of culture.
Can you share with me your impressions on the differences, the culture being practiced in the US for you?
As a US born American of Mexican descent, when you go back to Mexico, obviously you're looked at differently, right? They can probably spot you a mile away. My accent, right? I don't speak the best Spanish. So I'm, in some respects, treated as an outsider when you go back to Mexico. In terms of the differences in culture, I'll say that people in Mexico are probably more connected to their culture. Let's say your parents migrated to the United States, and maybe that was 20, 30 years ago. As time progresses, you have children, they have children, and so that culture, you may lose some of that over time, right? Just because the matriarch or the patriarch of the family, maybe passes on and it doesn't get carried forward. So I think that is one of the biggest differences. And I'm not saying that people from the United States are not connected to their culture, but I think there are differences. So we try to stay connected as much as we can, but I don't think it's the same as people who were born and continue to live in Mexico.
So when you say we are trying to stay connected, can you explain what that connectedness means for you?
I think one of the biggest things in terms of staying connected is probably language, right? And so the assumption growing up is that you are of Mexican descent, you know how to speak Spanish. And that's not true. So when I say trying to stay connected, that might be learning Spanish for the first time. I mentioned the different generations. And so if you're third generation, maybe your parents didn't speak Spanish in the household. So maybe you don't know the Spanish, right? And so part of staying connected is trying to learn the language, maybe trying to write in Spanish, right? Now, I think in terms of staying connected, I think the easiest thing is the historical part of it. Know your history, know where you come from, and try to carry that forward to your children and to their children. So that's what I mean by trying to stay connected to your culture.
Yeah, another reflections, I found the intertwine between language and culture extremely interesting. Being able to speak another language is one thing. Being able to understand the vocabulary and what that means in our own mother tongues is one thing. Understanding the culture and how the culture has an impact on the meaning of the words and start introducing layers of meaning into the words is a different thing. And I appreciate how you start with understanding the language, because you already have some flavor of the culture. And if you can add language into that, then you start understanding the layers of meanings. So I really appreciate that. And the part about history, I completely agree. And let's go back to your point earlier about seeing the family trees and start having that sense of pride. That's all coming from the historical aspect of our upbringings. I really appreciate that. So thank you for sharing.
I think if you have the language aspect, and you can navigate around the language aspect. Don't have to be perfect speaking Spanish, but I think it opens up opportunities to explore further. It arms you, it gives you something in your to be able to ask questions, maybe directly to the people, to try to learn that nuance, to try to get that cultural insight. Without that, you're probably doing research, you're reading in English, right? But knowing the language allows you to read literature in Spanish and know from the source. So I think that's important.
Thank you for sharing that. We've done a lot of reflections and look back in the last 20 minutes or so. I'd like to move to the future forward-looking part. What's next for you in the next 12 months?
In the next 12 months, I will continue to serve as chairman of the ASAE Tech Council. The work is there, right? So there's an abundance of projects and tasks at work. I want to challenge myself. And I mentioned going back to school. So in the next 12 months, I plan to graduate to finish up my degree in organizational management. I've been putting it off for far too long. Now is the time to take advantage of that. I'm going to weave some things we talked about earlier, right? We talked about living life to the fullest. There are these opportunities that I just cannot pass by. And I intend to selectively volunteer for, actually, I need to be taking things off my plate, not adding more. But if the opportunity is right and I feel I can add value, I'm going to go for it, right? And so there's some limitations in terms of what I can contribute. I feel as though maybe it's a conversation that I can add value, or maybe it's a particular project or task that I can help with. I'm going to go for it. Next 12 months professionally, I want to continue to explore opportunities inside the workplace. So I want to challenge my team. We mentioned AI. I want to learn more about that. I want my team to learn more about that. I want the organization to be able to have discussions and determine how do we leverage this tool that is going to transform everything. Those are some of the ambitions that I have in the next 12 months. In terms of family, spend some more time with my wife and loved ones, house things and stuff like that. We purchased a home 5 years ago. Home improvements never really go away. There's a huge list that's continuing to grow of stuff that I have to do at home. But professionally, personally, and then in the home, those are some of the things that I look at in the next 12 months.
There are two things that I love about what you just shared. I love that you always opt for challenges that maximize your potential. And I think reflect back to your chosen keyword, that's how you can enjoy life to the fullest as soon as you reach your full potential and demonstrate and share values to the network around you. And secondly, I love that at the end of the day, you come back to that quality time with families and with your loved one. At some point, I think we appreciate our career and professional life too much that I personally forget that families and loved ones are the ones that matter most for us. So thank you for reminding me of that.
It's hard. You're all about the challenge and you're all about career growth and opportunity and maybe chasing opportunities. And it's so easy to get caught in that. And not just in the moment, but to get caught in that and over a period of time. Ambition is a good thing and it could be a bad thing as well, right? But I feel like, as with everything, there's a balance to it. So chase your dreams, chase your goals. Don't ever give up on that. But don't forget about the people who helped you get there, right? That's the family. We say it takes a village. So don't forget about that. I think without that part, without that support, you have to realize you probably wouldn't be where you're at. If that goes away, what does that do to your professional life? So go all in, but don't put all of your eggs and all your chips right in one basket. Don't forget about the loved ones, and they're a key part of why I'm here and why I will continue to move forward.
That's awesome. Thank you. I do want to unpack one more thing in your plan for the next 12 months. I love studying. So when I saw that you are finishing your degree, I'm very excited for you. What it means for you to complete this degree in organizational management. And I feel that you have a stress that you need to finish it now. So why now that you have that urgency to finish it?
I've been kicking this can down the road for a long time. My primary studies were in electrical engineering, and life got in the way and wasn't able to finish that for whatever reason. I'm sure there are some excuses in there as well. Now, I always carry that with me. I always have that self-doubt. I'm the one that doesn't have the degree. Things are happening and I feel like there's some level of success in my professional journey and career. I haven't finished what I set out to complete. And so that always is in the back of my mind. And again, now is the time to everything else that's happening, volunteering, that's where the discipline comes in to be able to finish that off. And happy to say I'm 6 classes away from being able to walk across that stage, get it behind me, maybe think forward about the next educational opportunity. But I have to, for my team, for myself, for my wife, for my family, I've got to be able to say I did that.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot of strong will, a lot of disciplines in that example. And I wish you all the best. Your next 12 months looks like extremely busy. We have 2 more questions left for this episode. And thank you for spending the time with me. So look at what you have carved out for yourself in the next 12 months. What would you do to achieve all of these goals and at the same time holding strong to your authentic self?
I mean, my authentic self is to drive forward, right? So I think just by doing that is staying true to my authentic self. You're going after those dreams and goals and ambitions. That is my authentic self. That's what I do. It doesn't matter if it's now or in the future. That's what I will continue to do. In terms of accomplishing those goals and staying true to my authentic self, again, this is why I chose 3 keywords. I feel like they all are related to each other in some way, and they all tell the story of where I am right now. I plan to show up and be my authentic self in everything that I do in the next 12 months, whether that's completing that degree, whether that's volunteering, whether it's being the board secretary for Association Latinos, whether it's being a DELPer, right, an ambassador for DEI. That's me. I love making new relationships and connections. I feel like relationships are what make the world go round, the business world and the personal world as well. And that's what connects us to each other. So when I come into yours, again, I feel like being a photographer is like a special skill because it gets me comfortable again with getting in front in people's spaces and making them comfortable and opening themselves up to, let me take a picture of them. Right. And so most people are like, get away from me. I don't want you to take my picture. Right. And so again, I feel as though being an amateur photographer has given me some skills to be able to have that one-on-one, have them break down that barrier to being your authentic self. And when that barrier comes down, that's when I think the real magic happens. That's where both people can be their authentic selves. And that's what you really want. That's what we all say, right? Bring your authentic self to the workplace. But I think if you do that and you make those relationships and those connections, I don't think you have a choice but to be your authentic self because you're comfortable in front of that other person. You're comfortable in front of that team. That's the ideal place to be. It takes work to be able to have the confidence to be your authentic self. But make no mistake, there's no other way to do it. You have to be your authentic self. Can't go around and try to be who you're not really. I think eventually it'll catch up to you and it'll show through.
This is a good point of reflections for me, if I can share. I feel that as life gets busy, it's easier sometimes to derail and choose an easier path. And as I choose the easier path, then it's easy to forget the goal that I set out for me 12 months ago. Do you have any advice for us to stay focused, to be able to achieve our goals, regardless of the difficulties that life throws at us?
I'll say goals change. Goals can change over time. Circumstances may necessitate that you change that goal or that plan. Could be a family issue, could be a life issue. And so when you say you take the easy route, can you elaborate what you mean by that? I guess for me, maybe I'll interpret that. When you say you take the easy route, maybe 6 months prior, you said, I want to do this. And as you mentioned, things get busy. And then you may realize I don't have time to do all of that I really wanted to do. So to me, when you say easy path, it's probably a derivative of that original goal, right? And maybe it's 40% of what you wanted to do. I think there's still some elements in there that you wanted to achieve, but maybe you know yourself and you know that you're not able to do that. So I'll say that it's okay for plans to change, right? That's part of life. Not every plan, what's the Mike Tyson quote? Everybody has a plan till you get hit in the mouth, right? And that's when that plan changes. It's okay to change that plan and know your limits, know yourself. Think about it this way. If you try to stay the course and achieve that goal 100% of the time, but you know that you're very busy, stretched thin, you're probably not going to do a good job, right? You'll probably achieve it, but not to the same level, right? So I don't know how you are in terms of putting something out and being your own worst critic, but if you do something halfway, I don't think you'll forgive yourself for that. So I think when you acknowledge that I can't possibly do this, what I wanted to do, but I can do a subset of that, that's your new goal, right? And if you can achieve that, doesn't mean it's an easy way, but it just means it's the new way, it's the better way, it's the way that you can achieve that goal. So if you live in that world where it's like, I wanted to do this and I didn't do it, and if I do something different, that's the easy path. I think that's one way to look at it, but I feel like there's another way to look at it as well. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for sharing that. As life gets busy, challenges and difficulties throw at us, I feel that it can be tiring. But what I love hearing from your response is that it's also important to acknowledge that we can be tired and then rejiggle our goals. And I appreciate that as far as we are working towards even a subset of that is still one way for us to achieving our goal. So I love that we are able to recognize and acknowledge that. And again, not being too hard on ourselves.
One more thing on that topic before we move on. I'll say, whatever you do, you may have that goal. The goal may have changed, but I think you must continue to move forward in some degree, right, towards that original goal. You don't have to do it all at once, but I think if you know that you're moving towards that goal and you have a plan, it may take a couple years to get there to achieve that goal, but move in that direction, right? So just because things get tough, and they will get tough, you will get busy, you will challenge yourself, do not give up. I think that's one of the important takeaways. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to take failure and say this is a total failure, right? But I feel like you have to get back up and you have to give yourself another opportunity. I think that's where growth happens. So plans change, but do not ever give up.
I felt that I have to unpack that with you again, Carlos. Can you give me an example when you go through that experience? From that experience, I'd love to know what motivated you to overcome that difficulties or challenges.
And yeah, I think there are a lot of examples that I might be able to give you in terms of things get tough, whether that's the Marine Corps, whether that's in the association profession, whether that's volunteering, you're going to get challenged. So when I say trust yourself and go for it, that's where you build up tiny confidences. So they're wins, and you start to build upon your confidence. Your mind tells you, hey, this is really tough. It would be easy just to let it go, put it down and move on to something else. But that experience and that confidence that you've built up won't let you do that. So there's a sense of pride in that as well. On the one hand, I think you have to think about letting things go. They might be detrimental to you, and it might be not going according to plan at all. And so I think there's a realization that let me put that down. Let me take a step back and let me think about what I wanted to achieve. And then maybe it changes a little bit. But I think the urge to give up when things get tough is always going to be there. It's just a matter of dealing with that, fighting with that, and finding a way to dig deep and find that inner strength to be able to continue forward.
Thank you for entertaining me with that last piece of advice. We're getting to the last questions for this episode. So, if you are going on a dream vacation tomorrow, what is the one item that you would take with you and why?
No question. My wife would be the first one. She's not an item though, right? So, and the item that I would take has to be my camera. And for all the reasons that we talked about, my camera's with me almost everywhere I go. I'm not sure why. I just feel like there's art and there's beauty all around us. And I don't necessarily think that if I don't have my camera, I'll miss it. But there's a creativity aspect to it as well. You can see behind me, I have a whiteboard. I'm a visual person. So whatever's happening in front of me, the uniqueness, the unexpectedness, the uncertainty of things kind of unfolding in front of me. And I feel like my camera, I can focus it on that moment and I can capture it. It's a little tough to describe, but to answer your question, my camera will and my wife will be with me wherever I go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's it for today's episode. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. I'd love to hear your take on the chosen keyword. Have a lovely time, and thank you again for spending time with Humans of Authenticity. Until next time.
Being authentic, I think, is really about you becoming and being confident in yourself and in the things that you desire to achieve and do. And within you being comfortable with yourself is a sense of peace that resides, and deep down in that residue of that peace is happiness. A lot of times people will think happy and they will think of something far away. Happiness is not something far away. Happiness is what resides on the inside of you. When you sit down and you say, this is who I am, this is what I like to do, this is what I'm good at, and I celebrate that, then you have a sense of not only confidence, but happiness. And that's what it's truly all about. If you think about your career, your life, your trajectory, a lot of times we can feel like I'll be happy when I reach my goal. But at the true sense of the word and the true sense of being happy is being content and being happy where you are right now. That doesn't mean that you won't reach your goals. That doesn't mean that you won't be there. Happiness is not something that's fleeting. You don't chase it. You go after a goal, but you always need to be happy. And that happiness comes from contentment and gratitude of where you are right now.